Haul the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?
Hello, and welcome to Where Am I to Go podcast. Today, before we start the show, I would like to bring up some business things that have kind of been on my mind so that you can know where to get more Where Am I to Go. First off, I'd like to talk about the Facebook page at Where Am I to Go podcast. It's on Facebook, and we've been posting some wonderful pictures of some of the places that we've been and some of the adventures that we've had. Not everything that we go and do is made into a podcast, and so we take pictures at different places and post those pictures so that you guys can enjoy some of the different places we've been. Also, I really am interested in listener feedback. I have an email address at whereamiitogopodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is whereamiitogopodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear some of the listeners' comments and some of their ideas of places that might be interesting to visit and go and do. Today we were driving along the Gulf Coast in Florida, and as we were driving along, we came to a town called Carrabelle. It is a cool little town right here on the coast, kind of south of Tallahassee. And as we were driving through, like I said, the town's a cute little town. We ended up at lighthouse that they have restored that has 138 steps that you can climb to get up to the top. You can look out, you can actually climb up this thing through the spiral staircase and get to the top. But as we drove out, I noticed that there was a museum here that is called the Camp Gordon Johnston World War II Museum. And this, from what I kind of gathered, is where they train troops for shore landings. And I am here with Lisa, and she is going to take us through this museum and show us what all she has. This museum looks like it has a ton of stuff, and I'm excited to see this, Lisa. Let's take a look at what you got. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Carrabelle first?
Carrabelle is a former logging and fishing town that was established in the late 19th century, and it was the place where the U.S. Army established a amphibious training center or camp in 1942, and the purpose of the camp was to train primarily infantry for amphibious landing. So when they got to both the Pacific and the European theaters, or even in the African theater, that they could move troops from ship to shore and land them under combat conditions. The camp actually went through three phases, 1942 to 43. They trained infantry and Engineer Special Brigades for amphibious landings. Then they switched over to a special services camp where they trained port construction, hovercraft, and salvage groups along with amphibious truck companies. And at the end of the war, it served as a separation center for the Southeast region. So troops of all types coming back were separated out through this camp. And the camp closed in 1946.
Okay. And when you're talking about the amphibious landing craft, you're talking about the ones that you see on the D-Day invasion that have the front panel that drops down and has a ramp so that the soldiers or the infantry can run ashore.
Right. Amphibious means that they move from water to land. And for infantry, that means departing from a ship onto landing craft and then onto the shore in a combat situation. There are also amphibious vehicles, and some of those were here as well. But at least in the terms of training infantry, amphibious means cart them by ship, put them in landing craft like the Higgins boat, and then put them ashore under combat conditions.
And where did they carry these boats? Were these carried on the ship, or did these also come across the ocean with the fleet?
These were carried on the ships.
And how many of these landing crafts would a ship carry?
Oh gosh, I have no idea, but I bet it's quite a few.
And then how many men could you put on one of these? I mean, when I see the pictures of like the D-Day invasions and stuff, it looks like you've got 100 men crammed into this boat, all like in a cattle car.
Well, there are various kinds of landing craft. A Higgins boat is the smallest, and it carries, I'll have to check the placard, but it carries 36 troop, but they're also landing craft mechanized, which will carry vehicles. And then there is the landing craft infantry, which is a much larger, that is actually a ship and can actually make a crossing on the ocean. But those were not used here.
Okay.
Just the
So
landing
the one
craft
that carried
mechanized.
38 men at a
36
time.
men at a time.
36,
Right.
okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow, so they're quite a bit smaller than I guess the ones that I think I've seen, or else the picture makes it looks like there's a whole lot more.
Yeah, this is a half-scale Higgins
Okay.
boat, LCVP, and so they were close to 40 feet long. This is only 20, and they would allow 36 men to land on a beach or in shallow water, and then the coxswain who is operating the boat can back off the beach after
Right.
the ramp is back up and go back to the ship for another load.
Okay. And this is kind of the centerpiece of your museum, this 20-foot scaled, half-scale model.
Well, yes and no. It's an interesting scale model. The problem is that they were not made to keep, so there are not very many original Higgins boats left.
Oh,
there are
really?
a few scattered throughout the country, some of which are reproductions, but the ones that were actually used in the war generally were discarded, taken up by the people who lived in the area as fishing boats or the like, or broken down and used for parts. So finding an original Higgins boat is a true treat. You don't see those very often. So this is our model, and it will go with our other vehicles in our new building, which will be built shortly.
Well, you guys are in the process of building a bigger
Right.
facility?
We own 3 vehicles. We own a Willis Jeep, a Lieferwagen reproduction, and an original duck, or
Okay.
amphibious truck duck.
And the ducks are the ones that you see like in Boston, where they're taking you out on little river tours or
They're
around
very
town.
similar to those,
They've got wheels on them, and they can manipulate
Yeah.
them through traffic
Right.
and all of that kind of stuff.
They're true amphibious vehicles.
Right.
They can go
Land
on both
or
land and water.
water.
Yes.
And
So those cannot be kept on site because we don't have a building for them, but that you can see outside
Right.
there. We have the footprint laid out for a building that's going to be it's going to be constructed soon, so we can move our vehicles onto site and have them on display here.
Well, that's really cool.
Yeah, and this
That'll
will
be
go
nice.
in there. Yeah.
This museum's a little bit small or compact. It'll be nice when you have the bigger facility.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And so this was an actual training site where they trained the troops to be able to run off the end of the boat or
Well,
to land, or what all were they trained
They were
for?
trained in all sorts of combat situations. The camp itself was not here. It began at the town of Carrabelle and went east all the way to Alligator Point, and went
Wow.
north, taking up pretty much all within the Franklin County. And that camp, well, I'd say 250,000 troops passed through that camp. The camp itself was 165,000 acres. So it
I was going to say, that's big.
huge.
Just driving from Alligator Point to
Right.
here was quite a distance.
Exactly. So when the infantry came, they were sort of in their final stages of training. So they were learning sort of the final steps of combat training, and they also learned how to disembark from a ship down into the landing craft, and when they land, how to disperse and to set up their ammunition dumps and their supply dumps and secure a beachhead so that then more troops and more material can arrive. So they practiced that, and they practiced it right out here. We have photographs of LCMs and LCVPs landing on this very beach right across the street, which is really cool.
Well, that's really cool. And this is a real neat area. I mean, the beach, I think we're sitting at high tide, so there's not a lot of area between the beach and
Right.
the grass and the highway and all that. It's kind of what I'm assuming, but I'm assuming at low tide there's quite a bit more beach.
There's
to
a bit more,
practice
bit
on.
more,
Well,
not much.
really. There used to be a lot more beach before erosion from storms.
Yeah.
Okay.
We tend to lose the big dune line and big storm, and it takes a while for it to build back up again. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, as we come in here, we
Okay.
got some different glass cases that have lots of different artifacts in them. Let's kind of talk about some of the
Okay.
things that you've got.
Well, in general, we start the tour, if you
Right.
take yourself on a tour, with general information about the camp, and we have a rotating, usually 1 month to 6 weeks, special exhibit. So this month's exhibit is about the Battle of Okinawa, and we have on display items from the Marine Corps, which we've recently received, and information about the Battle of Okinawa. Next month, starting on the 15th, we'll switch over to an exhibit on D-Day and focusing especially on Theodore Roosevelt Jr., who landed on Utah Beach at D-Day with the 4th Infantry. The 4th Infantry Division was one of the 3 divisions that trained here at Camp Gordon Johnston before being deployed overseas. So, our special exhibit will be here. In July, it will roll over to an exhibit on the Holocaust, which we're doing jointly with a group in Tallahassee.
Okay, and in this one for this month, you've got lots of different pictures of the different generals that were involved. You've got a Japanese flag, a samurai sword, lots of different helmets, and some of that kind of stuff from Okinawa.
Yeah, we're going to eventually put together a permanent Marine Corps display in this back room here. We're putting these on special display now, and then we'll transition them over.
Okay, and then we also have a glass case here at right at the entry that's the Battlefield Cross. It's got the, I'm assuming that's the M14, kind of stuck in the sand between a couple of boots with American flag and a helmet on top. That's really cool.
That's a nice one.
It is, very nice display. And then we come on around here.
This is an exhibit on D-Day itself, which, you know, when you read the historical markers outside, they mention D-Day, and that really was sort of the primary effort, even though amphibious landings were done by troops from Camp Gordon Johnston in Africa and in the Pacific. So, but we have our own exhibit that is about D-Day, and the thing that's really neat about this exhibit is this diorama that feeds into a photograph taken right across the street. You can see the lighthouse, okay? And this was a practice landing, and all the big brass came to see it, and they had barrage balloons, and they had LCBPs, and they had LCMs landing. And so that's really kind of fun because, you know, this is what it looked like all that here. Many years ago. It was right outside the door, really, across the street. So one of the interesting things that we have is an original copy of Operation Neptune. This was one of the final versions that came out about 6 weeks before the Normandy landing. And this was in the possession of a Coast Guard officer in St. Petersburg, and was donated to us at the time of his death. And so this is an extraordinarily rare artifact.
And
really
it says
exciting.
Top Secret right at the top. And it has Operation Neptune. This book is probably 8 inches wide, 12 inches long, and it is like 4 or 5 inches thick.
All the details of Operation Neptune. You know, what ships were involved, what landing craft were involved, and, you know, what troops were involved. It's really, really very interesting. The model that you see above your head is a radio-controlled model. And it is a model of the Tallahassee Lassie. The pilot, who was Ralph Jenkins, he met his wife when he was training at Dale Mabry Field. And so all the planes he flew, and he had 6 versions of it, were always named after her, the Tallahassee Lassie. And this remote control plane was donated to us after the maker of it, Mike Kinsey of Monticello, passed away. His family donated it to us. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
And
it's got the Tallahassee Lassie in her bikini sitting on a I don't know what that is. It's probably an inner tube or a cushion or something.
Well, and this plane, the true Tallahassee Lassie, participated in the Normandy invasion. So he has the invasion stripes on the underside, which is also described in that plan. It's pretty neat. Over here is a mock-up of the barracks from Camp Gordon Johnston. Very few of these barracks are left at the end of the war. They just simply sold them all off, whole or piecemeal. The barracks were unpleasant. Most of them had sand floors, and they were cold in the winter and hot in the summer and buggy. It was not the best
I can imagine you had sand absolutely everywhere.
Yes. These bunks, the lockers, the screen doors, the windows, stove and the coal bin are all original from the camp itself. And so the conditions in Carrabelle at this camp were so bad. Omar Bradley was commander of the 28th Infantry Division, which trained here. He was promoted away from that division later after they left here, but he said, whoever chose this place to build a camp should be court-martialed.
And you've got a record player and some other neat things in here. This is really cool. You've got the bunk beds. I'll bet those beds were just full of sand and gritty to sleep on. I'll bet your socks and your toes were not comfortable after a couple days. And then they've got it set up to where they've kind of got a little walkway made out of pallet pieces or little 1x4s that to try and keep some of the sand off.
Yeah.
I can't believe that they'd have sand in a bunk floor.
Yeah, well, actually, there was even a gap. I mean, you can see it in this photo here. See the gaps? You know.
And it's elevated that the wind could blow through, and I guess it'd clean your bunkhouse every once in a while when the wind blew through. But who wants to just replace the sand? Wow.
There were several medical units that trained here, along with some Red Cross nurses and other groups. And so we do have a fairly large collection of medical equipment, devices, that kind of thing. And that's displayed here and in
this is a really neat display. You've got a snake bite kit and a little first aid kit, an atomizer, some medical spoons, stethoscopes, and all of it is military issue. I mean, you've got them in the military bags and all of that kind of stuff.
Field first aid kit, field surgical kit.
Right.
Yeah.
That is really neat.
And there's more of that equipment in here as well. The stretchers, if you've ever seen the miniseries, The Pacific, this is the kind of stretchers that the mortar teams would carry and bring their wounded out. We have several of those. And
you got a guy on a bunk with his head all bandaged up, and just some really neat display here. Then you've got a display with a whole bunch of different medals in here.
This is a display about a young girl whose father was brought down from Tallahassee to run the post office on the camp. And she was in the second grade, and she had come down and go to school here in Carrabelle. And we have letters written to her by her classmates in Tallahassee saying, "We miss you. We hope you're going to come back soon." But this has a very important little item in it. She was walking along the road, and a man in a Jeep drove up and said, "Can I give you a ride?" And she said, "My father doesn't let me ride in Jeeps with men that I don't know," which is only 7 years old. And he went on, he knew who she was. He went on to the post office, and he commended her father for bringing up such a thoughtful and obedient child, and said, "Listen, I'm going to have to inspect the camp in a few days. I would like your daughter to ride with me on that inspection." So he took her around the camp, went through that whole inspection process, and at the end of the day, he ripped off his 28th Infantry Bloody Bucket patch, and he gave that to her. That was the first patch she collected. She went on to collect patches from the soldiers during the separation, and her collection is here with us, including that was Omar Bradley's actual patch off of his uniform.
Wow.
Isn't that a neat story?
That is a neat story.
Yes.
Those are the kind of stories I like. Then you've got a display over here with a bunch of dog tags in it.
Well, since this was such a large camp, people are always finding things in homes or in the ground or, in buildings, and they donate them. So a lot of the stuff you see here was found in Lanark Village, where, people live today, or stuff that they found in their homes that, at the end of the war, they didn't keep much. They just sort of gave it away. And so they've brought us these items, an original Camp Gordon Johnston license plate. Used to be they would put specific license plates for military installations. Okay. And we have postcards from the area, on souvenirs from McCullough Springs, that kind of thing.
Just lots of really cool little
Yeah.
artifacts.
In here, because of COVID, we haven't been able to use our theater, so we just sort of opened it up as an exhibit. We think about Normandy when we think about amphibious landings, but the fact was, long before D-Day, Camp Gordon Johnston trained soldiers were already at work in the Pacific. And they landed in Australia, in Queensland, and started moving and taking beaches all the way up through New Guinea and the Solomons and the Bismarcks. And so the 6 special Engineer Special Brigades, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th trained here, and they were the ones who went through the Southwest Pacific and up into the Philippines. And so we wanted to make sure we covered them here, and we do have some artifacts from members of different units that actually went to the Pacific rather than to Normandy. And the 38th Infantry, now we talked about the 4th and the 28th, the 38th Infantry trained here as well, and they went straight to the Pacific, starting in the Philippines. And so we have stuff about the 38th as well. So, so this has become sort of our Pacific room. It's going to be a little awkward when we turn it back into a theater, but hopefully the new building will be, and so we'll be able to move that out and put it out there where it'll have more space. We're going to leave our mother and girlfriend and sister pillows. This was a wonderful program that was started in 1917. People who were in the military could buy these and ship them home. And so we have a couple of really extraordinarily unusual ones. I believe we've got...
Let me stop here, because this is something I've never heard of.
Oh, yeah.
And so I want to go into this a little bit more in depth. We're looking at a whole bunch of, they look like silk pillow covers.
The pillow covers, yeah.
And they've got the different camps. They've got Mother, my fondness and love for you is overflowing as year after year it keeps on growing. United States Army, Camp Gordon Johnston, Florida, U.S. Army, sweetheart. I can't see what this says. A heap of remembering, sweetheart. I can't read that one because it's kind of folded a little bit. But these things are really cool looking. And so now the soldiers would buy these?
They could buy them at the camp exchange. These were even sold by members of the Conservation Corps before the war. Mm-hmm, yes, but they were available during World War I all the way to the end of World War II. And you could buy them on the camp, and they usually had the name of the camp on it. So we've got some from, well, this one's from Dale Mabry, as you can see. This one is from the Navy, but they trained here too. So we've got Camp Gordon Johnston Army, and a really unusual one, which is when it was first called Camp Carrabelle right at the beginning, and that only lasted a few months, so this is a rather rare one.
And this one says, "Oh, the world is wide and the world is grand, and there's little or nothing new, but the sweetest thing is the grip of the hand of the friend that's tried and true."
Isn't that lovely?
And these pillow coverings they're probably 18 inches square. They've got fringe all the way around them. And I think Linda's probably got a picture. We'll post it to our Facebook page at Where Am I to Go podcast on Facebook. And we post pictures of lots of different things that we do there. But this is just, okay, so now they would have them stuffed at the commissary too, or they would send them home?
Most of the time they send them home empty, and then that would be something that the young lady would do when it arrived home.
Go ahead and stuff it and then finish it out.
Mm-hmm. And we have one in there that has its original mailing envelope with it, so you can see how it was shipped.
And so at the commissary you'd buy the envelope for these things also?
Right. Mm-hmm.
This is really interesting.
Right,
I had no clue that there were pillows. I've never seen this anywhere I've been.
You see, there's the little envelope to go with it.
Yep. Wow.
Isn't that neat?
That is really, really cool. It's right down here on the end in the case.
We try to tell personal stories. Sometimes they don't have anything to do with Camp Gordon Johnston, but this is a particularly nice combination. There's a local man whose father was in the Navy and worked on a submarine in World War II, and his grandfather was in he was in Mexico and then got pulled out of Mexico. He was with Pershing to go to World War I, and we have the effects of both of them side by side. Isn't that neat?
Yeah, you've got a sword in here, probably from Mexico. You've got the World War I Iron Cross medal. You've got a cigarette lighter that looks like a torpedo. You've got a horsehair lariat. And then moving on over into the World War II, you've got a submarine pin with a patrol star. You've got a Navy issue knife. You've got a laminated card. You've got a watch, several pictures, a face mask for standing watch on the conning tower while cruising on the surface. This is wool. And it's got eye holes and a nose covering, and it looks like a leather piece over the mouth, and then a strap that goes over your head so you can wear it underneath your cap.
Yeah, watch cap, probably, yeah.
And I'm sure, yeah, it's wool. That's really neat. It's
Isn't that
kind of like the
amazing?
modern day snow machine masks, all except in World War II.
Two, yeah, and it's in pristine condition, like it was never used.
Yes. Wow,
it's
I've never
fun.
seen one of those either. Not that I've seen everything that there is to see by a long shot.
These are some of our older displays, gradually updating displays, but this is about religion, and this is particularly cute because, you know, we have church bulletins and hymnals and New Testaments and prayer books and that thing. But just a couple of months ago, a young man came while he was at the RV beach resort, and they gave him a little soldier before he came over here to visit the museum, and he wanted to donate that soldier as a reminder to say a prayer for all servicemen. So we put it inside the display.
Okay.
Isn't that
that's
sweet?
Cool. Yeah, and like you said, you've got little military New Testaments and scripture books and song books. It looks maybe a song book.
A songbook.
Yeah, and just a lot of and those were just designed to fit in the Army pocket.
Right.
I mean, they're
They
small.
carried them with them.
And I don't know if they came with a looking glass or not that enlarged it, because
You would need it, yes.
reading that would be awful tough.
Camp Gordon Johnston had Italian and German prisoners of war.
Oh, did
like
they?
so many of the camps. And
That really is something that I've kind of learned just recently. We had one in Wyoming. That's where we're from.
Oh, okay.
And they had Camp Douglas, and we went and did a podcast
Yeah.
where they talked a little bit about the Prisoner of War Museum there. And again, they had the Italian and the Germans.
Right.
But it seems like these camps were kind of all over the U.S.
They
There
were,
lots
but there
of
were a
them.
lot of them in Florida, and the reason why is because we had a large amount of lumber and agriculture, and so it
Okay.
was very easy to put these men to work, and so they did work. And although we don't yet have really much of a list of who was here, which is unfortunate, but there was 250,000, well, no, I think there was 500,000 German POWs all over the United States. But we hope that if we are given access to the original files, we might be able to get some more names. But we do have one very important one. This man, Herman Blumhardt, was in the Africa Corps, and he was here as a POW. And when he went back home at the end of the war, and then he immigrated, and he lived in Michigan for years, and then he started coming down here for reunions.
Okay.
And reunions of the troops that trained here. But he was much beloved, and he was an inspirational speaker and motivational speaker, and he died just, well, I guess he died maybe a few years ago, and he donated
Says
all his
2010 right
he donated all his effects. And so I've seen some films of him. We've got some film in our archives, and he just was a delightful human being. Played the accordion and loved to dance, and just loved life. He was such a neat person. So I wish I could have met him in person. He was really something.
That's really cool.
He was very close to having been sent to a POW camp in Soviet Union, because his first time in war was actually on the Eastern Front, and then he was moved to the Africa Corps, and he was very, very fortunate to have been taken by the Americans rather than by the Soviets.
See, and the other one that we did, Camp Douglas, they were from the African
Africa Corps,
African front, and it was mostly the German and the Italian, just basically the same story.
Right. Well, back then we didn't have control over any places in Europe to hold prisoners of war. The only thing you really can do with them is to send them home. So
Right.
that's why they all ended up here. Now, one of the things that was at this camp was a huge amount of ordnance that was used in training. And yes, they tried to get in there and clean it all up. Some of it, they've had several passes through where they went in and found old ordnance, and of course they render it neutral.
Right.
And then we ended up with a collection of it here. But we try to make sure that everybody knows that if you ever see anything like this out there, that you not touch it, and you call the sheriff's department. They will bring ordnance disposal people in.
Right.
And this is all.
This too, yes. They've got anti-tank vehicle or anti-vehicle landmines. They've got some mortar shells. They've got some grenades. They've got just lots of really cool dug up stuff.
Stuff that's just been found out in the woods.
Right.
And people bring, I mean, some of the stuff, this was just donated
In
2 years ago.
2019. And it's a canteen that somebody found. I'm sure that as sea washes stuff away, you find all kinds of
That's
neat
actually one place that people do find.
Wow.
One thing that's interesting about this area is that this camp was served by a railroad spur. This railroad, the Georgia, Florida, and Alabama Railroad, there's only a little bit left. I think it's from like Bainbridge to Cuthbert, Georgia. But the spur used to come all the way down from Tallahassee, and you can see it on this map. It crossed the Ocklawaha River, and then you can see the line where that railroad used to go, and it came into the camp and just came right across the north side of the camp and then right and stopped in Carrabelle. And that railroad was there the turn of the century. They tore it all out in 1948, so there's no railroad left. But you can get out there and you can actually find bits and pieces of it.
Huh. Yeah, I would think that things would overgrow really fast here.
Yes.
It just kind of seems like it's just right for leave a place abandoned for a week and it's back to
Right.
nature.
Of course, no World War II museum is finished until you have all your war souvenirs. So we
Right.
do have a lot of really neat war souvenirs. There are weapons from the Axis, and weapons meaning also swords and knives and bayonets and rifles. We have a full display of the Japanese rifles. If you look over here,
Right.
you have the 38 and the 44 carbine, but the Type 99 came in several types. This was the original.
And those were Japanese.
These were
rifles.
Japanese, right. This Type 99 was called the Last Ditch. They were making them at the end of the war. They didn't take the time to make them look pretty,
Okay.
with all the metal stuff
Right.
and the like. And the interesting thing is that these had a reputation for being no good to shoot, which was not true, because they look almost exactly like this Type 99, what's called a school rifle. It's a fake, and it was
Okay.
used for the kids to drill in school. If you put a round in that, it would blow up in your face. But these were deadly accurate and very, very good weapons. So we also have this very unusual Type 2 paratroop rifle. You see it's in 3 parts.
That is cool.
Isn't that neat?
Yeah, it breaks apart right at where the action ends. The barrel, it looks like, slides in and locks in
Yep.
with the forearm stock. So the stock comes in 2 different parts. It's got the full stock cut down the full length of the barrel. And you must just snap it in together and then it's ready to go.
And you see how shiny this is? You don't, with paratroop, when you're landing, you don't want light reflecting
Right.
off
Oh,
of
yeah.
it, so it's
that
very
one's
dull.
got a real dull finish. And then you've got a samurai sword and you've got one of the Japanese
Nambu.
Nambu pistols.
Right.
Now those were semi-automatic, weren't they? Yeah, I'm
I
sure.
believe
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was a semi-automatic.
Now,
Wow.
over here, this, we think, is the first German or Nazi flag taken on German soil
Okay.
by ground forces in the war. Part of the 4th Infantry Division included a man named Sammy Ray, and he was in the 337th. What was that? The anti-artillery, and they got right up and crossed the Siegfried line, and they took a jeep and they just went tootling around. Of course, the Germans had
Right.
left, and they found an abandoned schoolhouse. and this flag was in it, so they took the flag. But then they were the first ground troops to cross the line, and then their commander said, we got to go back into Belgium because they had overrun their supply line. This is the beginning of the Red Ball Express and everything. So like, doggone it, we just got here and now we're having to go back. But they brought the flag with them, and that, they think, is the very first one. He donated it to the museum years ago.
And then, of course, that's a Nazi flag with the swastika and all that. And then you've got a bunch of, these are the German.
German, Italian, one German, 2 Italian rifles, a German Mauser.
And then you've got several of the pistols that they used. Okay, now you've got a couple of Japanese flags here, and this one's got all kinds of writing on it. What's the story with that? You have any
as
idea?
I understand it,
now it's not writing that we can read.
No,
it's written in Japanese.
Oftentimes, when a soldier was heading out, that they would have family and friends write good luck messages on the flags. That's how I understand.
Okay.
And so we have one up there as well that was brought back. This one is the Rising Sun. This is actually more commonly used by the Navy.
Okay.
And we actually have one in Okinawa. It's one about this big, and it was captured on Tarawa by 2 Marines from Florida. Okay. And we have the story about that with the flag and their photos. But we've got German helmets. We have getting ready to renovate this area because we have a lot of new German items that need to go in. So we're going to be shuffling things around and expanding this display. But there's some really cool and unusual things in here. We have a brand new...
You've got the camera and some binoculars.
Right.
Canteen.
The canteens are just fascinating. Look at that canteen.
Pouches.
It doesn't look like any other canteen.
No, it doesn't.
Isn't it? With a little cup on the top with the strap.
Yeah, to where you could pour into the cup and drink, and it's also lined with some sort of a... I'm sure that's
I think it's
cooling,
a wool, maybe?
Yeah,
to
that you
cooling.
water down and probably would keep it a little bit cooler.
That's really neat.
Wow.
Behind you we have propaganda, and a lot of these are original copies of propaganda, including propaganda money that they would drop. It looked like money, and then they would flip it over and it would be a propaganda message. A lot of these are translated for us,
and
which is neat.
These ones are Japanese.
This is Japanese, right?
And then these ones over here
This
are
is
German.
Now, it's propaganda dropped by the Germans on the Americans and by the Americans on the Germans. So it goes both directions, same thing with the Japanese.
Okay.
So you get a little bit of both.
I was going to say, I don't see any American propaganda, so we must not have been doing it.
No, we were doing it. Yeah, if it was, see, like Allied propaganda targeting German troops.
Right, okay.
Here is the original. This is just an image of the second side, and here's the translation. Same thing here.
Okay.
Okay. And... but then they did the same thing, see, to the 82nd Airborne. And then, of course, they had propaganda directed at their own population.
Right.
All right, and the backside of this is American weapons. At the beginning of the war, this is the rifle that they carried most often, was the 1903 Springfield. But then as the war progressed and they issued... the M1 and the carbine.
You hear a lot of the guys that use those M1 Grands, they really, really loved them.
No, it's really cool.
And the M1 carbine, and then the British Lee Enfield rifle. And then, of course, the Colt 911.
Yes, of
the
course.
semi-automatic pistol, but they're still making the 911s today.
Yeah.
So, very popular.
Now, over here is effects from... This was a man who was in the military. He was in an artillery unit at Schofield in Honolulu, and he was brought over and was in an amphibious truck unit. But what makes him so amazing is that he saved everything.
It looks like it.
And,
really
it's
cool.
just like a picture of life at that time, and so most people would have thrown this stuff out. I mean, really? A hat check ticket?
Stub for riding the bus.
But
a dog chain.
Yeah.
A dog tag chain with original envelope.
So we have
gasoline ration card. Wow, permit for visitors to purchase cigarettes at the commissary.
He moved here with his family, and his daughter, who is in these pictures, she's the one that donated all this. And it's just fabulous. He was the one that collected that paratroop rifle, the one that comes apart in 2 pieces. So that was part of his collection. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's pretty neat.
This is really cool.
Now, we did have African American troops here. We don't have as much information about them. They didn't really remember the war with the kind of nostalgia that the white troops did. They were poorly treated and relegated to awful tasks even when they were here. But we do know of several amphibious truck units and a couple other types of units that trained here, but we're still trying to learn more. We just were contacted by the daughter of a man who was an officer in one of these amphibious truck units, and he kept everything. So we think we may get a roster for that unit, which would be really nice.
Yeah.
But we try to cover stuff about the desegregation of the various parts of the military, and as much as we can put together about African Americans here. It's not much, but you can find some things, and we're still looking. So.
Now you've got a really cool picture here I'm looking at. Soldiers train in a mock landing craft before they begin to practice beach landings.
Well, part of the problem was they didn't have the Higgins boats yet. They were being built and they hadn't come yet, so they just...
This is a wooden crate box. It looks like it belongs on the back of a farm truck. And you've got 38 guys crammed inside this thing. And they've got it held up on the sides by logs holding it together so that they don't push the sides out. That's really improvising. I'm sure they felt really well trained after being shoved in a box and told that they could get out.
And here they're learning how to go down the nets, but it's on dry land.
Right.
You got to figure out how to do that. So you might as well get all those skills done while you're still...
And then another picture of them dragging a piece of heavy equipment out of the water. And these guys have got about 20 guys pulling on a rope to pull some sort of military craft out of the water. I wonder if it even ran when they got it ashore. Yeah, this is really, really interesting.
Okay, this is mostly American equipment. We've got, when they first started here, most of them were wearing this 1917 Brody helmet, just like they were carrying the 1903 Springfield rifle.
Right.
And it was a long time later before they started getting the modern helmets and equipment. But they were still wearing, if you see this guy, he's still wearing the puttees over his boots.
Right.
And that was very common then. They just used a bunch of stuff they had for World War I. Same thing with over here. There's some kind of cool bits and pieces in this.
The old goggles and leggings.
Remember from Band of Brother, the cricket clicker that the paratroopers carried? Well, they've got one of those.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty neat.
They've got lots of different things in here. Compass, wrist compass, and some cameras. Just this museum has a lot for being.
Stuff.
I mean, when you step in, it doesn't seem as big, but once you start walking around, you got a lot of stuff, and it's all very nicely displayed.
Well, thank you.
Very well organized, and it's not like you're walking into a warehouse. It's very well displayed, and you can see all of the displays very well.
This is all mail. We just recently upgraded all of this, so you see various examples of mail and personal letters and the like. Mail was extraordinarily important, as you can imagine, to the troops overseas. Because we are sort of the military museum of this area, we try to cover at least the local contributions to other wars. So I'm going to show you that.
And as we're walking over there, we walk past the TV that's got, you were talking about the video footage on there and how excellent it was. And it is some of probably the clearest World War II type video that I've seen. It's all in black and white, but very, very clear and shows a lot of the vehicles landing and the troops coming off and crawling through as mortar shells are landing in amongst them. It's pretty cool war footage.
This covers everything from Civil War, a little bit, Spanish-American War, First World War, Korea, and the Gulf Wars. And it's not very much space, so it's got a lot of stuff crammed into it. But we have a little bit from each of those wars, and we try, if we can, to put out on display things from local servicemen and women. And so we do have at least some idea of who in the area participated in World War I in Korea. We have a wall of honor. This county lost 3 in World War I and 2 in Korea. So we make sure that they are remembered here. And right now I'm working on the list of all those people in this county that served in World War I. It was a lot more than I expected.
Oh, I'll bet. Yes. And what about World War II?
We have a wall of honor. This is still under construction. We're trying to find all of the county. There were men.
I was going to say, you've got a lot more than 3.
Oh, yes, yes. Those are the ones that lost their lives in World War II, and I'm not finished. You see, I'm trying to keep up with that. And then we had in the old museum a display that commemorated everybody in the county who participated in World War II and then came home. Those were badly faded, so they're down, and we're redoing those on the wall of the theater. And so we only have about a dozen up so far, but there are many, many dozens to go. And we're just sort of kind of cranking those out as they go. But these, it's surprisingly difficult to research this, and I tried to make a description of that so people understand what you have to go through in order to get the story of somebody. 80 years and not all that much information to begin with, and so it's, it's tough. I'm supposed to get a visit from this man's brother next week. I'm really excited about that. So, So, and then finally, we kept a separate exhibit for the Vietnam War.
Okay.
And so most of the veterans that are coming to visit us now are veterans of this war, and so we try to make sure that this war is represented, not only with artifacts, but we've got the 5 county residents who were killed in that war. And so this one is really interesting. We've got some cool things in this exhibit, and I had to learn what they were when I was doing the archiving of them. So
shark repellent.
Yes, I know. Isn't that cool?
A container of shark repellent. I did not know there was such a thing.
I didn't either.
And an emergency beacon, a tank periscope, sea ration toilet paper. Boy, you had to be pretty thrifty on that one.
Yes.
We're talking, it's a little packet that's 1.5 inches long and 3/4 of an inch wide, and probably a total of a 1/2 inch thick. And I don't know how they wadded the toilet paper up to get it there, but boy, you better be.
You look like you could fit 2 of those in a pack of cigarettes. That's how small that is.
At least 2, maybe even 3 or 4.
Now, some of this stuff came from a local donor. It was medical supplies taken off of a dead an NVA medic.
Okay.
So it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, you've got a penicillin vial from North Korea and mercurochrome, some bandages, sulfamurazine, ample, whatever that is. Yeah, all in the little original bottles. And
yeah.
Wow. And then again, you have another one of the memorial crosses or whatever with a M16 with the barrel in the sand and a couple pairs of boots and the helmet on top and the dog tag wrapped around with the flag in back.
This was just donated.
POW
POW bracelet. Yeah, so we wanted to put out.
Explain that one.
Well, this was I don't know if you remember, that people wore bracelets that had the names of people, of men who hadn't come home. And this woman, her father was in the Air Force and he was in Vietnam, but she wore his bracelet to the end of the war, and he was never found. And they declared him dead in 1978. So she donated the bracelet, and we went ahead and looked up his story so that we could add that to display. And this is just sort of a summary of from the person, one of the persons who came up with the idea and started that POW and MIA bracelet program. But I remember people wearing those when I was in school, and how important that was to them. We had a lot of military in our area.
For some reason, I don't remember those, but that doesn't mean anything. You've also got a Vietnam driver's license issued to Jackie Sisk on Anderson Air Force Base in Guam, and death cards. They were placed on the bodies of Viet Cong soldiers killed by American forces. Translation, death awaits Viet Cong comrades and soldiers. Return or die. And it's got the Ace of Spades with skull and bones in it. That is cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
And then several different books on edible and poison oats and medicinal fruits of Central America, a prayer book, a couple of military handbooks, and then just a lot of cool little things here. This museum's really, really nice.
Oh, thank you. Well, modern museums have cut back on exhibits and put up more educational things with,
Right.
you know, fancy panels and multimedia. But those things are really expensive. And we don't really have much of a budget. So our best way to exhibit
I
is
would
to
rather
put
see
everything
this.
out. Yeah,
I would much rather see what you've got than a bunch of pictures that are exhibits.
yeah, yeah.
This is just really, really nice.
Got to show you that flag.
Okay.
This was just donated last month. These are two Marines, one from St. Petersburg, one from Quincy. They ended up in the same Marine Corps division, and when they were on Tarawa, they captured this flag.
Okay.
And he held it, and then his godson inherited it. He actually would contact him from time to time and say, "You want this flag?" And he'd go, "No, I don't want the flag." And so the godson donated the flag and the portraits and the information about how that flag was taken to the museum just last month. So
Wow.
it's pretty cool.
And Taro was an island in the Pacific.
yeah. Mhm.
It's North Pacific, if I remember right, in the
Yeah,
Micronesia Islands.
It's in the, yeah, and these two Marines went on to fight at Okinawa, so that's why
Okay,
they're
that's
included
why
in
they're-
this.
okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
pretty neat, huh?
So this is just really, really awesome.
Thank
I
you.
so appreciate you taking your time,
Oh,
especially on such short notice. This is really rough for me because I've got museums that are on my list, and I'm able to set up, and then there's places that I just drive by and I see and I go, oh, I wonder if I can get somebody to talk with me. Yeah. And sometimes I get really lucky and spur of the moment, and it works. And like I said, I so appreciate you taking us through this museum. It is really, really cool.
Well, thank you. Please come see us.
Oh, please come see this. It's well worth the time, and the cost is so prohibitive. I mean, she's all of free. And there's a cool lighthouse just down the way.
And we have a history museum in town too. So
and this is really a cool part of Florida. We're driving kind of between Pensacola and where else? It's kind of just in that little. Well, Tallahassee's to the north, but if you're
Right.
following the coastline, you're just kind of down here on the bottom, and they call it the Forgotten Coast. And there's a bunch of small towns, and it's kind of a fun little area.
We have one traffic light in the whole county.
Really?
One. Yeah.
Okay.
It's on the west side. We don't have to drive through it.
I haven't seen it yet. I was going to say I haven't seen any, and the roads are really decent. I
Yeah.
mean, this is a really nice area. If I was coming to Florida for an extended vacation, this is where I'd come as far as what I've seen so far. This is beautiful.
I'd rather be here than Daytona.
Well,
Tampa.
or Miami.
Or Miami, yeah.
No, this is very small town feel and very nice. So anyway, I finish out my podcast by saying the world is full of wonder. People need to get out and explore. There's so much to see, so much to do, and everybody have a wonder-filled day.
All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?